See, Robocop's off warranty.
Let me just be the first to say, girls' night.
Yay!
It's girls' night again because Devon, 1/3 of our podcast, has selected our next bonus movie, which this is Robocop 2, and then not been here to record for it, leaving the two of us to do Sunday night Robocop.
Yeah, we're
2.
excited. It's girls' night. We're painting our nails. We're doing like Korean facial masks.
Yep.
We were gonna watch a girly film called Bridget Jones's Diary, but like a mischievous younger brother. That's brother spelled BRXTHXR.
Yes.
Devon has removed the girly movie, not a girly movie, but the girls movie from the DVD case and left us with Robocop 2.
I know, we have to watch Robocop 2 instead and just make that girly, but we'll do our best.
Because Devon is at their girlfriend's house. Devon's on dome leave. Devon's getting robotic tier dome.
We have a sort of a robust dome leave policy here as as an employer.
Yeah.
And so like all three of us have done this. We've all taken time out. We've all taken dome sabbaticals. But now
Devon's
he's
on
on to Devon.
OCP, omni-consuming pussy. Be the pussy that consumes everything. Fuck.
It's a different movie. It's called
Yeah.
Teeth. So this is really going to be like a test of our we only do the sequels unless it's funny rule, right? Because Robocop 1 is a better movie. It's a more interesting movie. Like, essays have been written about Robocop. I found 2 essays written about Robocop 2, and neither of them are very good.
Yeah, I enjoyed this film. I thought it was better than I thought it was gonna be, but not quite. It made me want to rewatch Robocop 1, which, to be fair, I might do that tonight after this podcast.
It's interesting. I guess also, like, this idea of us only doing sequels unless, apart from where it's funny, this is the sequel of sequels. Like, this is something that Robocop 1 was, like, quietly more successful than anticipated. The studio, Orion, had no money, and so the second that happened, they greenlit the sequel and they started production on it immediately.
Wasn't there like a cartoon as well, and like a line of children's toys, which was odd because Robocop 1 was like really hardcore?
Oh yeah, I had one. I had the little like OCP cruiser too. But yeah, no, they really like cashed in very heavily. And it's interesting because like this phenomenon of sequels is something that's only really made possible by James Bond movies. Like, Hollywood sort of got scared off of sequels in the like 40s and 50s, and it was only really Bond in the 60s that made people think, oh, we can keep doing sequels like this.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting.
At least that's one thing that I read.
To be fair, if you're going to do a sequel, like Robocop is a good film to do a sequel to. And it's also a good point. You can jump in on the second one because you know what Robocop 1's about. It's in the title. Like,
he's a robot who's a cop.
Robocop,
as the posters put it, he's half man, half machine, all cop. I mean, that's a perfect prompt to go with. But so one thing the original movie did was like sort of in-universe commercials for suitably sort of like grim and subversive products, and that's where we jump into this with the car alarm that electrocutes people who try to steal your car.
So there's little adverts sprinkled throughout the film, which are like world building and extremely on the nose satire. Which, as the creator of Philosophy Tube, I feel like I can't throw stones in this enormous glass house, but I do.
This is
now that I see someone else do
worse.
it, I'm like, this does kind of kill the pacing slightly, but it is funny.
No, this is it's not implemented as well for one reason, which is we get a couple of those commercials and then we get the news, right? And I think it's very revealing, right? The news stories that we get, because the first one is this is a movie written by Frank Miller. And if you're not familiar with Frank Miller, he's the reason why everything is bad now.
Really?
Yeah, sort of.
All I know him for is doing Very Large Square Batman.
Yeah, he did Very Large Square Batman, and then sort of is the reason why everything is grim dark now. It's sort of that's a legacy of Frank Miller. In particular, like if you want to talk about movies, both Sin City and 300 are his sort of like are the best examples of his kind of like nihilism, sort of borderline fascism, misogyny. this sort of like affected cynicism. And so this is, I think it's one of the first movies that he actually wrote a screenplay for, because they couldn't get Paul Verhoeven, the director of the first one, back. They got Irvin Kershner, who directed Never Say Never Again, and also
really? This guy?
And also one of the Star Wars after George Lucas checked out.
That's interesting that, because like politically Never Say Never Again, if I recall, was a bit of a fucking shit show. The politics of this are confusing and not great, I would say, but they're not as bad as Never Say Never was.
Yes, yeah. So our news headlines are: the Amazon has been irradiated because someone built a nuclear power plant in it instead of just, burning it down out of spite like we did in real life.
Yeah, the power plant's melting down, and then we get this nice beat where the newsreader says, environmentalists are calling it a disaster, and the other newsreader goes, but don't they always? And then just kind of glosses past it. And it's like, okay, this is the kind of world we're living in.
Mm-hmm. There have been a series of terrorist attacks due to a cult forming around the most addictive narcotic ever designed. We're doing the war on drugs.
Yeah.
And it's, I guess, like crack is the idea.
This film, it's sold by the CIA?
Well, possibly. I mean, that would be a more interesting tack for this to take. But
yeah, this film doesn't really engage with the politics of the war on drugs, which were spoilers, listeners. If you're listening to this in the early 80s, very bad indeed.
Mm-hmm. And this sort of cult that has grown up around Nuke and is doing terrorism to preserve it is led by Kane from Command and Conquer. I'm not sure who's robbing who there, but
did we mention the drug is called Nuke?
Yeah. Yes.
Good shit. Love it.
And sort of like bald guy goatee.
It'll blow you away, man.
Mm-hmm. Sort of like mystical hippie but evil vibes. And
big Davis Serini vibes from this guy.
Yeah, for sure. He's got the skulls behind him.
Yeah. And I'm breaking my rule of not making fun of people directly.
And because of like this movie is like in many ways the opposite of prescient in a terrifying glimpse into the future that never was. They defunded the cops. The cops are on strike.
Yeah. I was like, based.
And the reason why Detroit police are on strike is because Omni Consumer Products, the sort of evil global mega corporation from the previous movie, has bought out Detroit police, and they're cutting their pensions and they're cutting their salaries by 40%. To which, again, good, based. And so we literally have a picket line of cops outside the police station not going to work because, they're blue collar workers, quite literally. And, the executives don't care about the little guy. Well, exactly. Yeah.
This film has interesting thoughts about the relationship between the police and corporations.
Yes.
And also very interesting thoughts about organized labor too. Which we'll get to.
Because the cops are on strike, Detroit is in anarchy, and we see this. We see a woman get robbed. The guy who robs her then gets
some Nazi graffiti. Deliberate choice for the graffiti to be Nazi. I was like, okay, interesting.
Mm-hmm. We see it's like a swastika painted on a box of the Wall Street Journal, which is, of course, America's sort of like highest icon of these things being defiled in this way. Guy robs a woman. Then gets robbed himself. He gets the shit kicked out of him by two sex workers, which is,
as far as I can see, the robber robs an old woman and then has a great time.
Yeah, exactly.
Two extremely hot women just kind of like
me on a Saturday night vibes.
Kick him and spit on him, and I was like, damn, lucky bastard.
Yeah, exactly. And you think for a second, based community justice, but instead it's like it's the sort of like Hobbesian war of all against all, right?
Yeah, and they're stealing the money in order to buy Nuke. We also see that a gun shop gets robbed and the owner gets killed, and then they're like, the cops are on strike, we can do whatever we want. But then of course in the distance there are sirens and a police car pulls up. One of the robbers who has stolen a bazookas the car twice, just fucking annihilates it. Sick as hell.
Also providing one of my favorite genders in a movie, which is when a cop car gets destroyed and the siren gets sad when it goes like, woo. Yeah, I love that. I don't know why I do, but that's genuinely one of my favorite things in a movie.
It's cool to make cars into cops.
If cars knew what cops were, they wouldn't be them. But having had his car blown up, Robocop exits the vehicle.
Of course, Robocop punches his way out of the wreckage. And
Yes.
listeners, if you don't know what Robocop looks like, to the eyes, he's definitely more robot than cop. My dude is he's like a fridge. He's huge.
Yeah, it's sort of like closest analog for our sort of Zoomer listeners is Iron Man, but without the bottom half of the like mask.
And also, Iron Man could like move flexibly like a man. Robocop walks like he also walks like a fucking dipshit. It has to be said, like arms like held out like like C-3PO. He's like
I really like that he walks like
brother.
a dipshit.
Yeah, I like it too, because I'm like, I thought they were making fun of cops. I was like, oh yeah, like obviously as a cop, he looks and sounds like an idiot. Like, yeah.
Peter Weller apparently consulted with a mime who was like an essential part of his preparation for this role in order to just in order to do the like sort of like exaggerated robotic movements.
That's really cool. And that mime gave him some famous advice, which was
So he Robocop
sadly it didn't render on a podcast, listeners, but it was
Robocop mimes towards them. He's trapped in a big pane of glass.
So pulling out a rope, like
his umbrella's blowing away.
The cool thing about Robocop, listeners, is his gun is stored in his leg, and it like goes and it comes out, and then when he puts it away, he like goes and he like twirls it and puts it back inside his leg.
Mm-hmm. And we see a couple of things happen. First of all, they shoot Robocop many times. Bullets do not harm him. And in
they
response,
they never seem to shoot at the bit of his face that you can clearly see.
Yeah, and he shoots them back and kills many of them in response. And my concern, just to sort of like, I'm doing a fun bit here, which is, what if we apply a sort of like rules-based liberal order to Robocop here? If bullets can't harm him, and they're not threatening anyone else, like they've already killed the gun store and he's dead, what is his legal justification for shooting them? Like, he has none. It is the purest fascism.
Well, threatening property.
Oh, well, I suppose.
Part robot, part machine, all cop.
No, exactly. And this gets me to my next point, because he shoots them apart from one who he leaves alive and immediately just tortures, just in the field, by weirdly lifting the guy up by his nose. And I did time this from start of movie to torturing a guy portrayed as like a good, I guess, necessary thing. It's like 8 minutes. And what he wants to know, of course, is where is Kane? Where is the the nuke cultist?
Where is Kane? His voice is so cool.
Apart from in one line, which we'll get to later. But so he makes the guy tell him where he gets his nuke from, which coincidentally is where Kane is.
He goes to this nuke distribution warehouse. We see a little bit of like Robocop vision, where we see through his eye scans, and it's like a crime in progress. Activate arrest mode. It's so fun.
All of the best bits of this are like legacy Verhoeven. Like there's a bit where he's walking to the drug lab and we see his like prime directives, which are uphold the law, protect the innocent, serve the public trust. Had that off the dome, and like those are flashing up over his view of people who are clearly terrified of him, which I like.
Yeah, and also like desperately poor.
Yes. He performs a warrantless entry. It's very funny to imagine Robocop sitting in front of a judge for this, by punching the door into this crime lab. He locks a couple of guys in a freezer for later, and
he kills a lot of people.
Yeah, curiously, there is Latin music playing at this point on a stereo as he looks in at this drug lab, where he detects crimes in progress, and he enters arrest mode, as you say. So he kills many people.
Logs on.
Yeah, he logs on, enters arrest mode. Damn, he just like me for real. Kills a bunch of people, less like me. Kane, by the way, sees this happening, hits the bricks, leaves out the back exit.
He leaves.
This becomes one of the sort of like obvious problems with Robocop, is that there is one Robocop. All the other Robocops are on strike. So
he can't move very fast either, because he can only move like kuchu.
Exactly.
He can only
has to mime towards you.
Yeah. And you don't have to run from Robocop. You can just like walk at a moderately brisk pace and like
Yeah, Kane literally like walks out the back door, gets into a limo, shoots a woman just because he's evil, and leaves. At this point, Robocop encounters a child by the name of Hob, who is like this sort of like greasy preteen, I would say, threatening him with a gun.
This actor is really good.
But because Robocop has been programmed with like sort of good cop instincts, he refuses to kill this child, which leads
unlike
to...
real cops, Robocop cannot kill children.
Yeah, I was going to say, we get a line that real cops have done their signal best to make untenable anymore, which is...
Can't shoot a kid, can you, fucker?
And then the kid takes advantage of his, like, sort of beeping cop paralysis to shoot him in the face, which doesn't, like... It gives him a weird sort of, like, headache because he's confused and remembers his, you know, human cop son.
Yeah. So the plot of Robocop 1 was Robert Cop, normal man, is horrifically injured and turned into Robocop, and over the course of the film, Robocop remembers that he used to be a real guy, Alex Murphy. So we're still getting a little bit of that in this
these
one.
two halves of his personality, except he doesn't anymore. Because
He's robot and cop.
Yes. And then the movie really wants to drive home the message: criminals will use their children against the police, because Robocop's human partner, Anne, enters the scene, kills a couple of the guys he left in the freezer just because, you know, so you know she's a badass. And then a guy exits using a baby as a human shield.
I mean, apart from the moral dimension of this, I feel like if I was using a human shield, I would pick a bigger one.
Really large baby.
But from a practical standpoint, it's not a great choice.
I think the vibe here is that if you try and arrest me, I will shoot this baby. And he says as much, and Robocop says no, but he says it in a really funny line delivery that he has got, where he just goes, no.
No.
I just kept thinking about that for the rest of the movie.
He sounds like the wheel from WALL-E.
No. And so using his like robot cop brain, perfectly ricochets a bullet off the door of the walk-in freezer and like sort of curves the bullet around the baby, Wanted style, and shoots the guy in the head. Baby saved. Outstanding work.
I do want to say something about his partner, police partner, Anne.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool that she's a lady in an action film and she's not sort of like super duper sexualized. That's kind of nice.
She's
nice that
wearing
she's not
like
she's wearing like normal police clothes. She's not like titties out. Like we don't get an unnecessary like shower scene with her. It's something I noticed.
Yeah, Robocop never has to like rescue her either, really.
Yeah, true.
Which is another thing that you would do. So yeah, he has now cleaned out the drug lab, still looking for Kane. And Robocop goes off duty, or if he can really go off duty, and he drives home and stalks his wife for a bit, like recreationally. I'm not sure whether this is the robot part or the cop part. And
40% of women who are married to robots.
And he experiences like flashbacks of his life as a human cop, which strangely imply that he has a foot fetish. Like it's weirdly based around his wife's feet. But he has like sort of erotic memories of his wife, and the whole time the robot cop is just sat outside stock still in the squad car. Yeah,
it's like massive like hulking robot in a police car. And we learn in a later scene that Mrs. Murphy, Robocop's, I guess, widow, kind of.
Yes. OCP would say yes.
Is suing OCP because Robocop keeps stalking her and sitting outside her house. So we get this scene where Robocop's handlers and a lawyer from OCP are like, look, you're just a fucking robot. You're a machine. Yeah. You're not Alex Murphy. That's just a glitch. Shut the fuck up. Admit it on camera that you're not, that you're just a machine and that you're not.
Specifically, the wedge that they get in there is, do you think that you could offer her like a man's love? Which is to say, we didn't build you a dick and you look scary. So you know, give up on your wife.
But plenty of men don't have dicks and all men look scary. So.
And he does. He like, she's brought in to see him and he says, yeah, I'm not your husband. Actually, one of the good lines in this, one of the sort of good lines in a Frank Miller way, is they built this to honor him, which I like. He's like, no, I'm the all robot, all cop, no guy underneath.
So the tagline to the second film, not as good. All cop, no guy.
Yeah, but we get the sense that this is done sort of like under emotional.
Left cop.
Left cop, you say? But we get the sense that he's doing this kind of like under duress, right? Like under emotional duress from OCP. So,
and then we meet the mayor, which my notes say in brackets racist ?
Yeah. So we meet the mayor of Detroit, who is black. There's a few black characters in this movie, but Detroit is like, I think even at the time of the making of this, was majority black. And he is trying to negotiate with OCP because in one thing that was kind of prescient in both this movie and in real life, the city of Detroit is bankrupt, right? And in both cases, it has been like forced into bankruptcy to sort of take advantage of it. So in the movie, Detroit is bankrupt because OCP has like entrapped it in a contract for taking over the police and Robocop and all of this, charged them huge fees that they know they won't be able to pay back. And as a result, they're going to buy out the city in order to privatize it.
Yeah. I mean, this sort of dynamic, as far as I understand it, has genuinely happened in Detroit. But it's interesting that the film portrays the city, and in particular the city's employees, the police department, as innocent in this, whereas in real life, as I understand it, the city of Detroit responded to its financial woes, which, to be fair, like, were inflicted on it by private corporations and corruption, by becoming what scholars call a predatory city, and like sucking the blood out of its own people, really, with the police's help. So in particular, like, a lot of poor black people in Detroit had their houses stolen from them and like sold off to private developers, and like had their water privatized and shit like that. So we see like, oh, the city's just trying to do good, as the corporations who are bad. It's like, I don't know, I'm not sure that's entirely true. Can't have shit in Detroit.
In this world, like, Detroit is destroyed in order to privatize it, in order to like rebuild it as this sort of like corporate state, where, you know, if that's happening in real life, they're taking their time about it. What seems to have happened instead...
and also it's noticeable that like they're destroying it in order to privatize it, whereas I think in real life it's destroyed because it has been privatized.
Well, yeah, that and sort of like to destroy it just in order to have destroyed it. And this is a thing that a problem that I have with a lot of sort of Frank Miller cynicism, is that there is a cynicism beyond cynicism that he doesn't quite get, I think.
Yeah. He's like, they're destroying Detroit in order to like privatize its stuff. And it's like, yes, to a certain extent, but also to another real extent, like Detroit is being destroyed so that black people won't have money and property.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's well, like Tulsa, for instance, back in the day. I think that essentially what it is it reminds me a lot of a comic book series called Transmetropolitan, which friend and all three hosts of the show, Matty Lubchansky, has sort of memorably satirized as Fuck City, right? Where the vibe is sort of all-pervading cynicism on the surface, but underneath that is sort of a deep layer of naivety, right? Where it's like, oh, well, people must be doing this because they have a plan. And if they have a plan, they can be sort of like intercepted in that sense. And it's like, no, sometimes it really is just spite for spite's sake. And I think this movie doesn't really get that. But so OCP, you know, sort of tell the mayor more or less to his face, yeah, we're going to buy out the city. There's nothing you can do about it. Yeah. He sort of leaves furious and helpless.
Mayor, how to say this? The portrayal of the mayor of Detroit.
It's sort of short fuse, I would say. Spends a lot of the time shouting, gesticulating wildly.
There's just something about this that it's just like the contrast of this black guy being very like, you know Chris Rock in Fifth Element.
Yeah, for sure.
It's that very kind of like energetic, sort of slightly wild, sort of bug-eyed portrayal. There was something about this portrayal that I was just like, this is maybe a little questionable, but I suppose it's not my area of expertise.
Oh, for sure. I don't think you're wrong about that, but it's two white people talking to each other about it. But yeah. So we go to OCP, just sort of now in conference, where like the old dude who's, if he has a name I don't remember it, but he's like the chairman of the board or whatever.
Norman Osborn.
Yeah, Norman Osborn is demanding sort of some new thing to like put the wrench on Detroit even harder. To which the suggestion is, Robocop 2.
Yeah, and they even call it that, which is quite fun.
Well, yeah, they announce it, and it reminded me very strongly of a line from 3 Days of the Condor, which I had to put in.
In every way, an improvement over the original. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Robocop 2.
Jesus, you guys are kind to yourselves.
And every time they talk about Robocop 2, it's in those terms. But so Robocop 2 is Iron Man 2, I think, steals this joke where they have Justin Hammer make like Iron Man, but isn't good. Essentially, the idea is they've gotten more cops into new Robocop suits, but every time it drives them insane and sort of like homicidal, suicidal. Yeah. They experience a sort of like body horror from being a robot that sort of only Alex Murphy, Detroit cop and robot can bear.
So we get this cool sequence of these like failed Robocop units, and one of them is one of them's a big gonk droid from Star Wars where he comes out as like gonk, and then he shoots a bunch of the scientists and then itself, and then the other one looks more like a traditional Robocop, but it pulls its own head off and is just like a screaming skull with wires and then just like blows up.
Like Mars Attacks.
And we see this operation is under the supervision of a woman named Dr. Juliet Fax, who's going to be one of our
fax machine.
Yeah, who becomes one of our main villains for the film. And
may I just say,
hello.
Dr. Juliet Fax, hello, looks like Kate Bush in a lab coat. Also,
this is my casting. I like her.
Lanky brunette. I'm told that Fax is with 2 X's, which is a fantastic choice. And her vibe is sort of like,
just to make the stupidest possible scientific decisions.
Yeah, let me get weirder with it. I can get so much weirder with this.
She tells the CEO, like, the problem is that we're using cops. Like, we had part cop, part machine, all cop, left dude. We need no cop, all machine, random dude.
Yeah, because
and the CEO's like, brilliant.
Yeah, because the thing about cops is they're very attached to their physicality. Okay, sure.
Bodies and spaces,
Therefore, when we put them in a robot, they get cop dysphoria, which, been there. They get dysphoria from not being a cop anymore and instead being a robot. And so instead of that, the reason why Robocop works is because he's very Irish Catholic and he has a strong sense of duty, a thing which no other cops are. And so he he's able to like bear the sort of the weight of this robotness upon himself. What she wants to do is just get random guys.
Well, she says specifically the thing that we need is a volunteer. Because none of these cops that they've turned into Robocops volunteered for it. And so a lot of them hate it. She says, what we need is somebody who actually wants to become a Robocop. Maybe somebody who like wants to live forever and is cool. And at this point I was like, okay, I can quite clearly see where this film is going. And it does take a long time to get there, but...
Also, that we can see that this kind of like gets... and like this is an annoyance to the... Smithers to this chairman's Mr. Burns. I will be calling them Mr. Burns and Smithers from here on out.
Good point.
His toady, his lickspittle, who is sort of like following him around and like sort of mimicking his mannerisms and stuff. And so we leave OCP for now. Robocop drives back to the station, breaking a picket line and explicitly making him a scab. He is a scab.
Scab.
Is it based, or is it like, I don't really want to call a scab cringe, but to break a police strike, is that scabbing morally? I mean,
answers on a postcard, please. Inside the police station, we see that some cops are still on duty. In particular, we see this guy called Duffy, who is a nuke addict.
Yes. I strangely progressive for 1990s and not make the cops magically immune to drugs. And so he is like secretly doing nuke on the job. So Robocop and Lewis, they get Anne Lewis, his partner, get back together, and they like establish that this child, Hob, the one who shot Robocop, is the one that they want to follow, and he's at an arcade, which they then go and surveil.
Yeah, this is really fun actually, because this kid is a crime boss, which I thought was just like a wildly unexpected turn in the film. I was really tickled by this. He's like the anti Bruce Wayne.
It's really weird because he's doing fully crime bosh. It is Bugsy Malone basically,
Yeah.
but the vibe of this movie is like sort of treating it entirely seriously. Like you could believe that they had written this part for an adult actor and then just switched the casting at the last minute.
Yeah. And this kid is really good. Although like the actor got caught in some kind of transporter warp field accident and was de-aged. But anyway,
it's strange though because like I have some thoughts about this because the movie is really keen to make a point here, and the point is, drugs and to a lesser extent, money have made this child into a crime boss, and it's like, yeah, okay, criminals, like we know criminals do use kids, like because they're easy to control, and yes, sometimes those kids do terrible things, and sometimes they claim and maybe feel to enjoy it, right?
Look at Alex Rider, child soldier.
Well, exactly. But that's like a complex mix of like safeguarding and ethics and like organized crime that we're barely able to talk about in real life, right? It's a sort of a deep wade for which Robocop 2 does not have the shoes. But they really
we should have gotten your husband on.
Oh, fuck, we should have.
Damn it.
But
he works with at-risk kids, listeners.
Yes, yeah. But I guess the thing is, he's like, there are ways you can make this work. There are ways you can make this interesting. The Wire, for instance, did this in a way that was interesting. But
also the film Attack the Block.
Yes, but he's too young to like for it to
he's
work.
Almost
I think
too young. I think he needs to be like a teenager, because there's that really amazing bit in Attack the Block where you find out that John Boyega's character is like 15, and it's like, whoa, okay, this kid's too young to be doing this. Whereas this kid is like, what would you say, like 10, 11?
Yeah, something like.
He's like prepubescent, and it's like, I don't believe this.
Yeah, but so Duffy, the corrupt cop, goes to the arcade which Robocop and Anne are surveilling, and we see that he's like being used. Like the lure of Nuke is allowing this child to extract the like locations of cops out of him to get killed. And
it's a really funny moment where Robocop goes into the arcade and it's full of kids, and he goes, "Isn't this a school night?" And they all like pelt him with popcorn, which I just thought was so funny.
I mean,
everyone in Detroit who sees Robocop is like, "Look at this fucking dipshit machine."
Yeah,
they treat Robocop the way that listeners, you should treat robot cops in San Francisco.
They treat Robocop the way that Philadelphia treated Hitchbot. There is literally a scene later where they spray paint him.
The way that Devon treats real robots. It's a shame they're not here.
That's right.
Devon hates the mechanized.
I know. It's well, but so not to be like, again, Robocop 2 is not a perfectly realistic portrayal of like organized crime activity, right? But it's sort of, again, curious that the cop here is like a helpless victim of his own impulses, right? Where we know in real life that cops who become corrupt or become engaged in organized crime, like they tend to be the more powerful ones in that relationship, whether that's like cops forming gangs themselves or like generally speaking they're more useful, happy to it's strange. Anyway, so Robocop busts up the place. Hobb simply exits again. At one point he has to get his guy to like lift him over a fence that's too high, which is very funny.
Hobb pulls an automatic on Anne Lewis and then like tries to garrote her and like nearly succeeds. We see Robocop tortures Duffy.
He does. He like bangs his head into an arcade machine a few times. Once again, the same question. Where is Kane? Where am I? What am I doing here? What's my motivation? To which Duffy tells him, yeah, he's at the old sludge plant, which is a fantastic combination of words. Yeah. We had to decommission this sludge plant. So Robocop goes there in his like blacked out police cruiser. Much like an Equilibrium, right? They loved painting over cars and all of the like logos on cars. And
all
the
Robocop all left cop.
the all car left cop car is interesting to me, right? Because it is kind of prescient, right? In that, like, yeah, cop cars did get more tactical, kind of. The all black thing was a real thing, but it still looks like a sort of a 90s sedan, so it looks like absolute shit. I kind of like that contrast. It's like totally unintentional. It's like, oh, we didn't have the language to describe that yet. something which I will pick up on later.
And when he infiltrates the old sludge plant, there's this slightly weird beat where he finds Elvis's corpse. What was that about?
I mean, so in his den, I guess, Kane has Elvis's corpse, a bunch of Elvis's shit, and a picture of Oliver North, which I guess is meant to convey, like, sort of, he is modeling himself on American heroism and American infamy, right? And these sort of, like, these personalities. But it goes completely unremarked upon, and it's just sort of this weird orphan in the script that never really goes anywhere. It's interesting.
Anyway, he finds Kane and gets owned.
Yeah, Robocop gets profoundly dunked on for the next sort of 10 to 15 to 30 minutes. And this is a powerful statement of man's ability to organize against capital if man has a 30 caliber machine gun and an electromagnet. Because he goes to shoot Kane and they shoot his gun arm off. They literally disarm him.
Hey.
And then attach him to a big electromagnet, tie him to a table, and then take turns trying to, like,
smash him up, chainsaw him, dismember him. Yeah,
dismember him. Hob is there, the child. He's, like, sort of sadistically taking part in this torture too. And we see that this hurts Robocop, who we had not previously seen had the ability to feel pain.
But they dismember him and they dump him on the curb outside police headquarters. My notes say Jesus, because it's pretty fucking graphic. They have this, I guess, puppet, this animatronic, this incredible, like, bit of practical effects that's like a limbless torso and the face of Robocop with his helmet torn off, so you see his whole face. And I guess it is just mechanical, and then they must have, like, Peter Weller making noises out of it, and his, like, eyes are fucking rolling all over the place because he's been, like, his computer brain's been really damaged. It's really quite like, oh god, like...
We gotta fix Robocop. So like the cops, like, carry him back in. Meanwhile, we go back to Kane, who has sort of inveigled Duffy back to his sludge plant. Had Hob hit him over the back of the head with a bottle. Actually, we got a fun line there, which is he offers Hob a drink, and Hob goes,
"Hey, I'm a minor."
Me when anyone is mad at me on the internet. And then he like drags him in because he knows that Duffy has, like, betrayed his location. He has him vivisected with a scalpel. And he makes Hob watch, which is almost an interesting point about how all of this, like, exposure to, like, violence for kids is, like, it is child abuse and it's coercive and controlling. Doesn't
quite go
really
there, but it was the beginning of an interesting point. We see that OCP won't pay to have Robocop fixed, and the cops are all really upset because they're like, well, we like him now. I think I may have misheard, but I think the lawyer in this scene for OCP is literally called Shyster.
He literally is, yes. By the blue collar cops, because, you know, he is the elite, is, like, keeping their fallen brother from, like, receiving medical care. Also,
Dr. Fax has the worst idea ever.
I love this scene for a couple of reasons. First of all, as we talked about with Rising Sun, the 1980s, 1990s American fear of corporate governance was totally inseparable from anti-Japanese racism. And so Smithers goes to see Mr. Burns, who is sitting in an onsen in the middle of a Zen garden. And Dr. Fax walks in wearing a kimono and little else, because, you know, how else is an executive woman in the 80s supposed to get ahead, right? So we're already, like, making her, like,
if you want to get ahead, you got to give some head.
Well, exactly.
Yeah. So she has this frankly fantastic idea that she's like, well, we need a volunteer to turn into a robot cop. What if we used, I don't know, a death row inmate? They want to live, right? Turn them into an immortal machine with a gun? Great plan.
Yeah.
She must be giving insane dumb to Mr. Burns.
I mean, have you seen this woman in profile? The nose. I think I have 1980s woman dysphoria as well as 1960s woman dysphoria. I might just have woman dysphoria at this point.
Better than robot cop dysphoria.
Wow, that too.
Yeah.
So she then goes to a focus group. And this scene's really interesting to me in a couple of different directions.
This is so
because
weird because this whole beat about they make RoboCop gay, it's like it kind of comes and goes so fast.
They go to this focus group, and the focus group are liberals. And here's what they say.
If he just talked things out with people instead of firing that big gun of his.
Couldn't he take a little time to address environmental issues?
And the whole time they're sort of like, the OCP executives are like rolling their eyes and laughing. And she's like, oh, that's an excellent point.
The thing is, I quite enjoyed this scene because at the time I saw it, I didn't realize this plot point was just going to like come and go for no reason. I thought this was doing what the fourth Matrix movie does, which is deconstruct the appeal of the original RoboCop. And I was like, oh, this is actually quite clever. Like, these are potentially valid criticisms of RoboCop and by extension RoboCop 1. I didn't realize that the movie was like trying to make fun of these criticisms at the time.
No. And what it almost is, like, had it a crumb of self-awareness, is a very prescient critique of like sort of corporate greenwashing and pinkwashing and things of this nature. Because the guy says, why can't he speak out about environmental issues? The joke the movie is making there is environmental issues are stupid, and this guy is stupid for wanting RoboCop to speak out about environmental issues. But so Juliet goes, yeah, why shouldn't he?
But also, like, because we opened the movie with like the Amazon is irradiated, which like, and also like, oh, I don't know, hindsight's 2020, but a lot of movies of this era and other eras were just like, hippies, environmentalists, and it's like, yeah, those guys were completely right. They were like totally proven right.
But so what I think it almost does is have the corporation go, yeah, you're right. He should engage with the environment. And then RoboCop, engages with the environment while still being RoboCop and still does the thing, and it makes no difference. But it doesn't do that. Instead, they make RoboCop woke. They make him Wokocop.
Yeah, she does conversion therapy on RoboCop.
She fucking hypnodoms the shit out of this dude. Genuinely. It's incredible.
So she has this like scene where she's reprogramming RoboCop to make him soy and cucked and gay, and she's like,
she force femmes him.
Yeah, well, she's like typing on the computer, and she's like, I type it, you think it. He's like, you type it, I think it. And she's like, oh, this is so much better than dealing with humans who need years of therapy and persuasion. It is a kind of quite conversion therapy scene.
Yeah, for sure.
But then
also,
she reprograms him to make him gay and sends him back to work.
I cannot stress enough how horny this is, right? Genuinely. Which is, okay, I think it's great, but I also think it's a weakness in the movie, right? Because again, you're like, oh, this one's a scientist? Well, I bet she's a scientist with a pussy. But so she's kind of like sexually domineering in these scenes. She's like, don't resist us, sexy voice.
Good boy.
And it's like,
yeah,
interesting. This is what happens when you let women be executives: is that they like forcibly make you gay, a thing which we would all hate being.
Make you gay with their pussies.
Yeah. So RoboCop brackets gay comes back to work. and now
sorry, that fucking took me out. RoboCop brackets gay. Yeah, he's got a little Progress Pride flag now on his arm.
RoboCop
it would have been better if they'd done what real cops do, and then like, as you say, like made RoboCop woke and gay, and then sent him back to work, and then the next scene is like him with a pride pin on, like beating up a gay person. Which is what cops do in real fucking life. Like,
but that critique hadn't been invented yet, at least not by Frank Miller of all people.
Yeah.
So RoboCop, he goes back to work. He takes the knee outside the precinct in solidarity.
Not to harp on this point, but the other day, listeners, I was, for legal reasons, not at a protest against some fascists. It was like trans people versus fascists.
Classic matchup.
Yeah, it was great, an all-time one. And then at the end, like some people were like voicing criticisms of the police, and one of the police officers said, "Oh, don't assume that I don't have family members who are part of your community." And we were like, what do they think of you being here, dude? Like, what do they think of the fact that you're just like defending these fucking people? Like, it would have been better had RoboCop just like worn a pride flag and been abusive, as real cops are.
Sorry, not to cut in on an episode that I'm literally not even on, but it's even funnier than this, because right near the end, Abby asked one of these police officers, hey, how do you guys decide which direction to face when you're like standing in the middle of a protest like this. And he was like, there's not really a hard line on it. Most cops just tend to like choose which way to face. And that was nice because that basically just revealed 100% of them unanimously decided to face towards the trans people as opposed to the TERFs, which is cool. It's cool to know. Thank you. Very comforting.
It's strange to say that, like, perhaps there could be a movie about how being a cop requires some level of cognitive dissonance, perhaps through the prism of a man who is all man and all
machine. Like, that would have been,
exactly.
really good. They should have remade it.
What I'm saying is reboot Robocop again and let me write it.
Let us do it.
Yeah, exactly. But so he comes back into the precinct. He's like, he's happy. He seems a bit weird, but he's woke. He's progressive now. And because this movie is obsessed with trying to make a point about criminal kids across town,
we get some happy slapping, which I haven't seen in ages.
Yeah. A bunch of like a little league team is beating the shit out of a store owner with baseball bats. Under the guidance of their coach.
Yeah, that was the fun reveal, actually, that they're all in there doing this, and then outside the coach is telling them to do it.
And so woke Robocop shows up. The coach starts shooting at them, and woke Robocop, again, totally unaffected by bullets, just walks through the bullets like, hey, we can talk about this. Do you want to de-escalate this at all? And of course, he does not. He keeps shooting. And Anne has to just fucking shoot him in the fucking head instantly.
Anne domes him off.
Yeah, she domes him off tactical style and is then like, yo, where were you during that? Robocop gathers all the kids together and gives this kind of like staid Superman. In fact, I think it is a parody of Superman lecture about like, haste makes waste, don't use bad language sort of thing. And then the kids run immediately, of course, because Robocop can't run very fast. They're driving along.
I feel like that was a problem before they programmed him to be gay.
For sure. But, we're getting to a sort of a philosophical critique of Robocop here. He's like driving along and tells him to go faster. And he's like, we're following the posted speed limit. We should try and set an example. And all of this together, the totality is the idea of a cop trying to set an example, trying to engage with the community, trying to use things other than lethal force immediately is ridiculous. But it's not ridiculous in the critique that you or I might have, where it's like, no, that's not what they're for. It's ridiculous in a sort of a much more right-wing thing, which is, if you do this, people will take advantage of you. People will spray paint you and like hit you with a baseball bat and laugh at you. And you will be completely ineffective.
Because you'll be too busy, shooting perfectly around a smoker as he's just trying to smoke a cigarette. Like,
yeah, which he does do, and then says, "Thank you for not smoking," because liberals,
Yeah. So the cops surmise, and I thought this was going to be like the rest of the film was like Robocop is gay now.
Yeah.
But in
no, they're like, he's got this. They plug him in, and the friendly sort of like technician who works in the precinct is like, yeah, no, he's got all this gay shit in his brain. They've given him sensitivity training, and we see a bunch of his like his commands, his protocols, which are like, have consideration for others, be conscious of the environment. And she goes offhandedly, yeah, you'd have to either like kill him or like give him like a 2,000 volt shock, which would probably also kill him, but it might get the shit out of his brain. Robocop, in becoming all cop at this moment, decides rather than be woke for 1 second more, he will electrocute himself. This is like very nearly a parody of itself. Like,
yeah, and also it just like it means that this whole Robocop gay arc just kind of like disappears.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that could have been a good film. Actually,
you could sort of make this movie again according to the same script even, and have it be a sort of a fairly trenchant critique of both Capital and cops. This idea that he is more willing to potentially kill himself instantly than to have the thought, be conscious of the environment, floating around in his head is
fair point.
Is very funny. But he grabs a couple of.
He's got fucking British columnist brain, and that like he would rather die than respect another person even slightly.
Yes, yeah. It's like, use the pronouns. No, I will kill myself instead. And so he grabs the like live electric cables like Frank Grimes and electrocutes himself to the point where he is knocked unconscious. The other cops sort of break the picket and gather around him in concern.
Yeah, and they literally walk. We see them walking over their picket signs, and I'm like, huh?
And we see that Robocop, he reboots, and now he's totally free. He has no directives, only his own sense of like moral justice and duty. So he looks around the cops and he says,
Are we cops?
because, you know, to take strike action is wrong. You should go be cops. We should all go together and arrest
Well, I mean,
Kane.
what really binds cops together is a love of violence, a love of extrajudicial violence.
And we get this reinforced, right?
According to this film.
All of the cop cars sort of roll out together, which we are sort of led to believe is majestic. We see them sweep past a hot dog cart, and the hot dog vendor looks at all the cop cars, and I think genuinely, right, this is a difference, right, between Robocop 1 and Robocop 2. Robocop 1 would also have had this line, but it is making fun of you, the viewer, right? Because the sentiment is the same in both cases, just with a different layer of self-awareness, which is the average American is meant to respond to the presence of cops like this.
They going to kick somebody's ass.
By relishing imagined violence against somebody else, right? And the difference between this and Robocop 2, and between the difference between this and Robocop 1, is that Robocop 1 sort of heavily implies that that's a bad thing. And Robocop 2 is like, oh man, they really are going to kick somebody's ass though.
Yeah, this film kind of is made by people who saw Robocop 1 and were like, sick!
Yes. So it is the sort of like missing the point, the thing going over your head meme.
It's yeah, it is. It's like the people who saw Starship Troopers and they're like, damn, Johnny Rico's so cool.
Mm-hmm. So the cops arrive at the old sludge plant, much like Equilibrium. Sort of a painted over police cruiser and riot gear was the most militarized most people could imagine the police.
But this film thinks it's sick.
Yeah.
Well,
but
and also robot.
It seems quaint now, like compared to the levels of police militarization that we experience now. It's sort of like, it's a beautiful little time capsule where it's like, holy shit, these cops, they're really onto some serious shit. They're wearing helmets. Wild. But so
Robocop leads the charge because he's uncucked. He's uninstalled his cuck drive.
That's true.
The child, Hob, he shoots some cops, which, no comment.
Yeah, again, compared to Equilibrium, right, we do see cops get shot and wounded, painfully shot. Like, you have cops like lying on the ground screaming and shit. No one else gets wounded.
Does kill him.
all the other Welsh Marge Simpson. Whereas when Robocop or the cops like shoot one of the bad guys, they're not in pain. They like get shot gruesomely. Like there's a lot of like 80s squibs in this movie.
Yeah,
but like
point.
They just fall down completely dead. Whereas, you know, there's cops sort of like writhing around and stuff. And it's like,
we really do get a visual representation of violence of cops, good. Violence against cops, bad.
Violence of cops, clean. Violence against cops, you know, messy, distressing. But so they chase Kane. Kane escapes in a sort of a big sort of armored truck, which Robocop commandeers a motorcycle. A year before Terminator, mind you.
Yeah, I noticed this. I was just like, oh, we're doing Terminator 2, but Terminator 2 did this.
Yeah, exactly. Ripped it off, but I think made it better. And activates arrest mode by diving through the guy's windshield and instantly landing him in the hospital.
Yeah,
so,
he plays chicken with Robocop, forgetting that Robocop is like physically invulnerable, and it just gets crushed.
Yes. We then go to the news where we find out that the cops have seized like, you know, millions and millions, enough to pay off the city's debts in drug money. But, and this is both a juvenile joke and it also occurred to me as anti-Semitic. State Attorney Sphincter is like barring them from using the money to pay off the city's debts, right? And it's like curiously, like, obviously it's an immature joke, but combined with the lawyer being called a shyster in a different scene, I'm like, that's interesting. I'm not sure I care for that at all. So
Dr. Fax.
Dr. Fax.
Of course.
Dr. Fax.
Makes the stupidest possible decision. It's like, a super criminal who's been like critically injured. Perfect Robocop material.
She's already made the best decision possible that day by putting on the blue suit that she's wearing in this scene. And so anything else she could do sort of like seems like an irrelevance. But she goes to visit Kane in hospital and she's like, hey, I'm going to take your brain. You're going to love it. Also, I'm going to kill you now. And she switches off his life support and just like watches him as he dies.
They extract Kane's brain, and you don't see it, but there's really good sound design in this scene. With all the kind of like sawing and like squishing, and the way that the surgeons are so casual in what they do, which real life surgeons are as they perform surgery. If you ever get the chance to watch surgery on a living human being, you will be surprised how casual surgeons are and how much they make jokes.
It's a meat mechanic, you know? But
they pull out his brain and spine and eyes, which looks hilarious.
Yes, again, sort of I go to Mars Attacks for this sort of like schlock kind of thing. He ends up as like a brain and eyes in like a tube.
We see that Angie and Hob have an argument about whether or not to... Angie was like Kane's girl and Hob's the child. They have this argument about whether or not to rescue Kane, and Hob's like, nah, forget it, I got a plan. Stick with me, Angie.
He's full Bugsy Malone at this point. Also, he's like sort of holding her nuke addiction over her.
And then OCP are like, so unbeknownst to OCP, Angie and Hob use some of Kane's money and they make an offer to bail out the city. We learn
which
the
is
details
reduced
of
to
that
doing
offer.
telethons.
Yeah. And OCP is sitting around like, damn, like some mystery person's going to bail the city out of their debts. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to have to assassinate the mayor. And Dr. Fax is like, what if instead of using a normal gun, we use this huge, and specifically the head of OCP says we need to not be up, this can't be traced back to us. And so Dr. Fax
Who else is building giant robots?
I've got the ultimate stealth weapon. It's a giant fucking like tank robot with the brain of a super criminal that has our logo on it. And of course like she's uploaded Kane into this like giant robot cop body.
Yeah, and she's like using nuke, which he still needs to ensure his obedience, and again a very sort of like Domly fashion. And she's like, yeah, no, just let me send this guy after him. So the mayor goes to meet Hob, this mysterious benefactor, is like sort of surprised to see that he's a child, but is so desperate that he agrees to corruption. He agrees to take the 50 million, which is again
drug money.
Again, curiously low amount of money. Detroit's bankruptcy in 2013 was like, tens of billions, I think.
This scene is really, really interesting. First of all, incidentally, Hob does some casual homophobia.
He calls him a queer.
But then Hob has this plan. He says, look, you're the mayor. You want to tackle crime. Why do people commit crime? Because they want money to buy drugs. So if you
child, that's a slightly reductive view. If he's like, no, to buy drugs.
Yeah. And so Hob says, I want you to decriminalize nuke, and we will become legitimate business people. It will reduce crime. It will reduce violence. And sounds great. And this proposal, which listeners has been empirically proven to be a good idea, not when done by child criminals, but in general, the decriminalization of drugs like provably works. This is treated by the film as absolutely fucking ridiculous because it would deprive the noble cop of their sacred duty of gunning down people who fucking cross them.
I would say it's like the intent is less to be ridiculous to me and more like, damn, makes you think, and then you don't think about it that much.
Yeah.
Like
makes you not think.
Well, exactly. Like Hobbs' sort of like selling point is hit like his we don't advertise, we're not like big corporations, we're practically a small business. And contrast that with OCP, and you're meant to be like, oh damn, maybe he's got a point. Anyway, next scene. And that's how the movie treats it, as damn, anyway, next scene, which is Robocop 2 enters the situation. Robocop 2 is like twice, 3 times the size of Robocop 1.
He's a 10-foot cyborg. Is he on like, does he have legs or does he have little tank tracks. I can't
He's
remember.
got legs. He's definitely got legs.
He's also
and
got
like a Gatling
extra
gun.
arms that he can deploy, and like a big thing. He's got like a digital face, which is like Kane's cyber face.
Graphics. The graphics on this are quite something.
He looks like that like Shrek meme. And he comes in and he shoots everybody up. The mayor manages to escape. Hob hides in an armored car.
There's one bit that I really want to talk about, which is that he sees Angie, and Angie recognizes him and is like, okay, I can get it together. I can still work this. And so she touches his like knife hand thing with the gun on it in a way that is sort of like strongly suggesting that this is the robot's dick, right? And I want to contrast
the
here.
The hand
right?
is the dick of the robot.
Exactly. The virgin, I don't have a dick, so I can't love my wife, Robocop, versus the I can still finger my girlfriend with robot hands, Kane Chad. Except this doesn't work,
well,
right?
She has this line where she says, it'll take a little bit of getting used to, but I could get into it. And I was just like, nice, good. I'm glad that people said this.
She's like inclusive, she's progressive, she supports this transition. However, just even this reminder of it is enough to make him go insane with rage, and he like snaps her neck several times.
Brutally. Yeah, it's pretty fucking graphic.
This is a fairly sadistic movie in a lot of ways, and I have some thoughts about
it's like a hardcore 18.
Yeah. Sort of like the 80s aesthetic of violence and fear of violent movies, and it fits right into that paradigm. He like machine guns, Gatling guns the truck where Hob is hiding. The mayor escapes by like fleeing through like a sewage tunnel. And then Robocop shows up which is great because it's been like 40 minutes and I literally forgot what Robocop was doing last in Robocop.
He was uninstalling gay.exe.
That's right. And so he goes to, Robocop 2 is now gone. He goes to the truck, sees Hob dying, and
I was surprised at this. I was like, whoa, they're going to kill this child.
Yeah, they kill the child. It's like a sort of like emotive death scene. And he's lying on a pile of money in a suit, which is not a subtle movie. And Robocop sort of like more or less goes, drugs killed this child. There is one of the better nihilist Frank Miller lines, which is, as Hob realizes he's dying, he's like, well, you know what it feels like to Robocop. It really sucks. And Robocop just goes, yes, which that's good nihilism to me.
Yes.
Yeah. Robocop mounting an impassioned defense of like the value of a good death.
Hobbs asks not to be left alone, and Robocop holds his hand as he dies, which is quite a sweet moment, and I did feel sorry for Hob.
Yeah. Meanwhile, across town, OCP is having the rally to restore subtlety, which is they're unveiling their new headquarters. They're about to take over the city. They're moving City Hall to their new building. They've unveiled their flag, which, if you're not familiar, is a red flag, the white circle in the center with the OCP logo and black inside that. It's being guarded by a bunch of guys in leather trench coats with leather peaked caps. It's blink and you'll miss it stuff.
Because remember,
I
corporations are fascist, but cops.
That this is an allusion to the Third Reich of Nazi Germany. It's a little bit of Alice analysis there.
Subtle. You blink and you'll miss it.
That's right.
But yeah, so OCP, Mr. Burns is like, yo, we've got a plan. We're going to improve the city. We're going to knock it all down and we're going to build towers.
Yes.
And the mayor rocks up and is like, nobody elected you. This is completely undemocratic. And the head of OCP says, well, it's democratic because anyone can buy stock in OCP and own a piece of the city. And the mayor's like,
and if
what
you
if
look
they
at
can't
the
afford it? And he's like,
polls-
sit down and shut up.
Yeah, and if you look at the polls, you see this is actually quite popular.
Yeah, this was quite a scary moment.
And by the way, because I didn't want to do two separate press conferences, here's Robocop 2.
Yeah, I'm busy. Also, Robocop 2.
Like a Steve Jobs thing, Oh, by the way, here's Robocop 2, and Robocop 2 comes up through the floor.
Mr. Burns says we're going to make Robocop 2 in Detroit, which is going to mean like jobs. And we do get this, I guess, in the wake of Donald Trump, slightly scary moment where the film is shown to be quite prescient in that it's shown to be popular, or at least that in OCP's polls it's popular, that the city be run like a corporation, one in which you can be fired if you are not productive, and in this case, literally fired upon by Robocop 2.
There's an equivalence, I think, that the movie makes between OCP and Kane, because way back when he was still alive in his drug lab, he's like looking at new designs of nuke with a scientist who is a Frank Miller cameo. I hate Frank Miller; he looks like a dipshit. And he like Kane goes,
Made in America.
Yeah, we're gonna make that mean something again.
It's like interesting. Okay, we're really getting to sort of like American anxieties of the 80s and early 90s. And again, like on the one hand, as with Rising Sun, on the one hand, this is an anxiety that was about the sort of like hollowing out of American post-industrial urban centers, right? But it wasn't, and like it was also an anxiety of people who had absolutely no concerns about that, and in fact were participating in that, but who were worried because people were buying Japanese cars. Because anyway.
So Mr. Burns holds up a big container of nuke and is like, yo, this is nuke. It's real bad.
Robocop 2 is making grabby hands towards it the whole time.
And he's like, Robocop 2 is going to get rid of all of the nuke in the city, and that's why we love him.
He's gonna seek it out very aggressively.
Yeah. He's going to destroy it, all the nuke in the city, by consuming all of it.
Juliet enters. By the way, she's supposed to be like moving quietly, but she's wearing heels, so the way in which she runs down these steps is genuinely really funny because she looks like that one picture of John Lennon.
She's going to end up breaking her legs and becoming Robocop 3. Meanwhile, Robocop 1 is here with a big anti-tank rifle, which rules.
Yep, he's got like a 50 caliber rifle, and he's like, Kane, I know what you did. You killed a child. Let's take it outside. So Robocop 2 seizes his control of his own programming by destroying a remote control.
And obviously like opens fire and like kills a bunch of people. And
Yes. And then we get to the next and last 20 minutes of the movie, which is Monster Fight, right? Because this movie doesn't have a third act, and this is one of the like criticisms of it at the time even, is it doesn't have a third act. So, because what they wanted to do was just rely on this monster fight being enough to tie it up. It isn't, but that's what they try and do. And so we get a sort of a long fight scene where Robocop and Robocop 2 fight each other. Robocop 2 shoots a lot of people. We get a lot of wounded cops. We get a lot of wounded journalists, and particularly women. Like, we see a lot of women get shot in this movie. This is the point at which the use of squibs really sort of veers into sort of like the sadistic, I would say, because it's purely gratuitous. I
mean, I think probably they're like, it's the final fight. We're really going to go all out. You're not seeing anything yet, and it's just like, well, it's interesting who your choice of target is.
Yes,
they do have this fight. It is, the special effects are still pretty good. I think Robocop 2 is animated in like stop motion, which still looks like pretty cool. Still looks
sort of Harryhausen-esque. I mean, I honestly was pretty bored by this point, but they have the fight. Robocop 2 has like 3 false deaths. The bit where he like blows up and then you see him like come through the smoke or whatever. And ultimately, Anne has the idea, because many cops are, selflessly, heroically shooting at Robocop 2, knowing that this does nothing, and they're sort of laying down their lives in the process. And Anne has the idea to, like, first of all, to ram him with a tank, which sort of works, and second of all, to distract him with the big canister of nuke, which allows Robocop 1 to get on his back and, like, shoot through him in order to remove Kane's brain and squish it with his like mechanized robot fist.
A cop's fist punching a human brain is the visual that sums up this whole film.
Not a subtle movie. And then we get we gotta tie all this shit together in the last minute, right? So Smithers and Mr. Burns collude to pin everything on Dr. Fax, on Juliet. They try and make it her fault. But unbeknownst to her, and because they're still fucking, Mr. Burns and Juliet walk out together. He literally steps over a body on the way, because it's a subtle movie. And then
he gets away with it. He drives off.
Yeah. Anne turns to RoboCop and she's like, "Oh, do you think I should do something about that guy?" And he hits her with the line, well, just patience, because we're only human. And that's the fucking movie. We go straight to credits.
Yeah, it just ends. It doesn't, I was like, oh.
It really doesn't have a third act. It doesn't try and even make a point about like, oh damn, he really is getting away with it, and how do you want to feel about that? Instead, it's just like, well, go see RoboCop 3. And interestingly, RoboCop 3, they overcorrect in the other direction, and RoboCop 3 is like PG almost.
Really?
Yes, genuinely. It's like turning the big violence dial back and forth and looking at the audience for approval is what the RoboCop series is.
Huh. How many were there?
Jesus Christ. I think they made like 5 all told, and then they rebooted it again with insanely Gary Oldman and Samuel L. Jackson in it. It's sort of a cautionary tale about sequels, and ultimately that is James Bond's fault. But what does RoboCop 2 say about...
RoboCop, and to an extent RoboCop 2, like, it's nice to see a film that is trying to be about something.
That's true.
I mean, we compared it to Iron Man earlier on, and certainly the final fight is very Iron Man 1, and that you've got little robot dude versus big robot dude. But, like, this film has, like, themes. I don't think they're particularly good. Like, it has politics and an ideology. I don't think they're particularly good, but it at least, like, provokes questions and invites the viewer to think about things, albeit in a very
no one could ever
way.
say that Frank Miller didn't have an ideology, you know? What does this movie say about masculinity? Not using violence is like soy and gay.
Be violent.
And something that is literally programmed into you by women. Domineering women, mind you.
Yeah, women are bad and will use their pussies against you unless they're cops as well. Are there any other women in the film?
There's Anne.
Oh, yeah.
Who's
like a sex worker, yeah.
Violence.
Controlling herself, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, masculinity is inherently tied with, like, copness.
Yeah.
I guess.
Again, we see this theme emerging, and it's also like part of why I hated masculinity. We see this film emerging in this theme emerging in so much masculine film, which is that masculinity, men are the ones who kill. Men are the weapon. Men are the ones who do the kind of violence. And it's like, I don't know, I think that sort of does a disservice to men, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Shit, it might even do a disservice to cops at this point. Like, not that you necessarily care, but it does rankle a bit to be like, oh, well, okay, clearly the move is kill early, often, all the time.
Yeah, to be fair, I mean, I know some cops don't think of their... I mean, just most cops probably don't think of their jobs as being bad. Like, I've met cops who like want to help people and who don't like violence and stuff, and it's like, well...
Yeah, and you decided to record a podcast with me. I think it's genuinely... I think sort of the way I feel about cop films in general is that you have to treat them to an extent separately from the way that the police function, and more about sort of like as a mythologizing function of the police, right? And the myths that we tell about the police and the way that the myths that police tell about themselves are important in that way, because, like, I don't know, those ideals matter. And if the ideal is the guy who becomes woke and soy and gets sort of the worst thing of all you can be, which is humiliated, like being spray painted by children is sort of like more ridiculous than being hacked apart with chainsaws to RoboCop. That's a sort of a grim path, I would suggest.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly, if I were a cop, I would be a little bit uncomfortable about this being the ideal of copness.
Also, file this alongside The Dark Knight Rises for one of those curious portrayals of, like, proletarian cops. Where the cops are like the little guy, they're like, just blue collar schlubs organizing against the powerful. And
working in the cop factory.
Exactly.
Hitting a big crime with hammers.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a product of 1990 as much as anything else. Which is to say
as I said at the start, like the film's stance seems to be that corporations are bad, but the people whose job it is to protect corporate interests with violence are good, and it's like it's kind of a weird ideology.
Yeah, where you have to invent a separate kind of cop that's wearing like a leather coat that does the same thing, but they're the bad cops.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, if that's your stance, then ultimately I think it's like, I think you just enjoy violence, don't you?
Well, I mean, this is a movie. This is a great movie if you enjoy violence. It's got a lot of violence in it, and it does enjoy it.
Violence is shown to be like a purifying force as well, except when it kills the child.
Yeah. And that's Robocop 2. We're not. It's a bonus. So we're not doing a scum system. We've got the next mainline Man from U.N.C.L.E. episode, which I don't even know what that's called. One spy, always too many against, never again.
One of our spies is missing?
One of our spies is missing, maybe.
So. Just like on this podcast, you know?
That's
with
right.
Dev.
Fingers crossed, all three of us will be back for that one. But if not, that would be very on brand too.
True. I am going to go away on dome leave in a few days. So
yeah, we'll see. But thank you for subscribing to the Patreon. If you do, you don't have to get this because of the winter of content. But you're quite welcome to if you would like to. And thank you for listening. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to yet another episode of Kill James Bond. I don't know which one, though, because we are banking these episodes as we're going away on holiday, variously, the three of us, throughout the month of December, which means that you will not get a fresh and new jazz outro every time. You will get this one for all three episodes that are yet to be released in December. So let's crack on so this isn't too annoying to listen to 3 times. Our £15 and above patrons are Christina Fox, Amanda Comet, Freya Aloysius, Gustavo Lira, Jack Holmes, Thomas Oberhart, Nick Boris, Kentucky Fried Commie, Yarrick, Nata Mori, Harriet DeCock, Corios, Benno Rice, the Commissar formerly known as Jen, Beef Crime, Library Hitman, Callan Burney, Max Gamenhart, Jonathan Gerdes, Jack Drummond, Hell, Kit Devine, Lysamesh, Jay Martindale, Jonathan Siegel, Big Titty Goth Girl, Tarp O, George Rohack, Mothman, Harrison Fuller, Trip, Violet Cybra, Alex, L plus Liz Nash, doing well in Florida. Sorry you Brits are freezing your asses off. We don't have heating bills, so have some dosh. Paint McCalla, a trans robot, Ronan, Elizabeth Cox, Zoe Shepherd, Finn Ross, 2 Spy 3 Many, Turfs Eat Shit and Die Alone, Quinn Valeri, Alfredo, and Wolfie. Thank you. Kill James Bond is, of course, Alice, Abigail, and Devon. Our producer is the wonderful Nate Bethay. Our podcast art is by Matty Lubchansky, and our website is by Tom Allen. See ya.